Welcome, welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it another moment before we roll into our workshop today. Okay. I can imagine there'll be a few more people join us, but let's get started. Welcome to Resonant Movement. We welcome you from wherever you are, no matter what time it is, however you can show up. We're happy you're here. And today we are here with Rafa Kalapa, who will be joining us to support the conversation around social change and nonviolent communication. And Rafa has been studying NVC since 1995. He was a student of Marshall Rosenberg's and also an interpreter. Is that right?
I worked with Marshall Rosenberg for 10 days in Colombia, South America, and learned more in that 10 days in the previous 4 years of studying it. Yeah. But that was a while back, 1999.
Wonderful. And Rafa also teaches both in Spanish and English. He'll be participating in a conference this weekend that's in Spanish. If any Spanish speakers out there want to join that, I'll add a link at the end of this session. It's a free conference. If you don't know Spanish and you want to see how fluent the AI translator is for Zoom, you could probably participate with that too. And yeah, Rafa's got a couple of really awesome projects, one of which is a Kalapa, Rafa Kalapa, kalapa.com. I'll put the link in the chat later on. But this is a program that focuses on teaching and coaching with social change as one of the main platforms or focuses of the work with a lot of different other components. So if you wanted to learn more about that, I invite you to take a look at his websites and reach out. We'll send around his email later on so you can get in touch if you need to. So before we dive in, I'd like to introduce myself. I've never introduced myself for these resonant movement sessions, and I would really like to just give you guys a little bit of insight about my experiences. And I wanted to do this with an idea that it's honoring a good friend of mine who was instrumental in bringing me into this community and into this work. His name is Sasha, and he passed away 8 years ago tomorrow. And I was I was a research scientist at a university, and Sasha and I worked really closely together, and we became really good friends. And over the span of 6 years, we created a bunch of different programs to use satellite remote sensing and machine learning algorithms to evaluate imagery from space to estimate forest deforestation and agricultural land cover and all kinds of really cool environmental conservation stuff. We also went camping together, and I took him to Thanksgiving a few times, and we went to the beach, and we just became really close. Well, Sasha was overwhelmed with his work, and working all the time was really heavily demanded upon by our lab. And he had a lot of emotional imbalances, or I would say insecurities, from a judgmental perspective, because he oftentimes felt like he wasn't good enough. He had the biggest heart, such a kind person, and always very loving. And yeah, he committed suicide. And that was like a jumping off point for me to study mental health, to study nonviolence, to study nonviolent communication. And for my own well-being, I did the study, right? I was trying to save myself from mental instability and just mourning the loss of his love. And through that, I became really heavily entrenched in nonviolent communication and other types of strategies and tools that we can use to help to support our mental, physical, emotional well-being, not only in our relationships, but also within ourselves. And so I just want to dedicate this session to Sasha and all of the love that he shared with me. And really grateful for you all to be here today, to join us in this important movement around social change and how we can work with systems that we're a part of to help to bring our needs more to the forefront so that we're cared for. We can care for ourselves and so others start to care for us. So before we dive in, I wonder, are there any requests to the group? Do we have any things that we'd like to acknowledge as we hold this space together? One thing I wanted to bring to the forefront is the fact that we are recording the session. And so you have choice where you can keep your camera off. It's being recorded through speaker-only view. So only if you speak up with your camera on will your image be captured. So I would invite you to join us with your video cameras on if you want. It would be great to see your faces. Are there any other things that we want to keep in mind as we share this space together? Okay, well, that's a living request, and it will continue to be open. If anyone comes up with anything that comes to mind or a certain situation prompts you to want to make a request to the group, I invite you to do so. The only other request that I have is that we come together as if we're sitting in a circle. We're learning from each other. We all have something to contribute from our life wisdom and our experience. And I'm sure that you have insights that could really could really support the group in our learning. So please feel free to share what you have and what you know. And feel free to do so in a way that feels comfortable to you. So if you have questions, raising your hand is always nice with respect to the flow of the session. But, unmute yourself, speak up, write in the chat. We'll try to follow the chat as much as we can. And just inviting you to be here fully, or to whatever degree that you can be present with us today. All right. So before we dive in to our topic, we have an exercise that we're going to start with. But I'd like to just start with these two quotes. I wonder if anybody would like to read them in the chat. Read them out loud for the group. I'd love to hear someone else's voice.
Leanne, before we go to reading the quotes, there were a couple messages in the chat, I think in response to your eliciting requests.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you for
And
checking.
and and I have a request of the group,
Great.
which is that if you're willing to turn your camera on, I think that would help us all feel more connected. And I would like to see you. And if you need to have your camera off, I support you in having your camera off. But I would prefer it on if you're able and willing. Thanks for hearing me. Go ahead, Leanne.
Thanks, Rafa. All right, cool. Would anyone be open to reading one of the two quotes in the chat? They're both from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Juliana, please.
Nonviolence is absolute commitment to the way of love. Love is not emotional bash. It is not empty sentimentalism. It is the active outpouring of one's whole being into the being of another.
Thank you. Would anyone else be up to reading the second quote?
I saw Svetlana's hand up. Go for it, Svetlana.
Thank you, Rafa. Yes, with the left, right hand, I'm just trying to raise my hand. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent actions. Dr. M.L. Key Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, Svetlana. So in that second quote, I see the importance of compassion, and we oftentimes relate that to empathy. They're different, but very similar. Does anyone know the difference, or how would you differentiate between compassion and empathy? Anyone? How do we differentiate between empathy and compassion? Is there a difference? Rafa, I'm talking to you too if you want to answer this, since you are one of the experts in the room.
I'd love to hear what other people have to say or what you have to say, Leanne. And I'm happy to share my perspective on it.
What's the difference between compassion? Yes, Kati, please.
Hi. One of the aspects I think would be that empathy comes first. So at first you open the space and connect to the person, and then compassion comes by. But first you have to open and connect and have the feelings and the needs and the space.
Great. So connecting with the other person, what's going on for them, is part of the empathetic process, and compassion is a little bit more. It's like the next step. Sammy, what about you? Do you have something to add to that? What would you like to say?
For me, I would say that empathy is more about a deep understanding, whereas I don't think understanding is necessarily always necessary for compassion, or shouldn't always be necessary. I don't know. That's my take on it. But I think the person before also, I agree with that also in a way, yeah.
Anyone else? How do we differentiate between? Juliana, I see your hand.
So it's something that I'm also exploring and just sharing from that space. So empathic presence is one of the actions that compassionate actions that I can do. And compassion it's a feeling, and it's a feeling that moves me into an action. So empathy is like just being with another person, a respectful understanding of another person's experience, as Marshall says. So that is the way I understand this, that empathic presence is just one of the things, one of the ways, actions that are compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Cliff, please, what do you have to add?
Well, there's so many things or aspects. In Swedish, we have two words, empathy or medlidande. It says empathy, and the other one is with suffering. So I would say that compassion is with suffering, that you're feeling the emotion, you're sharing the emotion of the suffering. And empathy is, I read sometime that empathy is like going on a journey with another person into their inner space, sitting with them, not in front of each other, but besides each other. And you're listening and you're going into this like a movie. You get this on the adventure, what's happening inside that person. and you can enjoy that travel the way you like, but just being there and let somebody just talk. Marshall usually said, just listen. All you have to do is listen. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Awesome. I think everyone had brought a lot of value with the contributions that they've made. I do want to just say one more thing, and it's very much along the lines of what Cliff mentioned, is the Latin root for empathy is empathy or pathic, and it means to be in feelings. So within the feelings of another or with ourselves. And compassion means to be with passion or suffering. And so we're suffering and we're so passionately with ourselves or with another that we're moved to do something about it. Rafa, do you have anything else to add? I'd love to hear if you do.
I could talk about empathy for half an hour, and I know we have other plans for the call, but there's so many key differentiations. So I'll share a couple. One is in NVC, we talk about giving empathy, but technically you don't give empathy. And by the way, I agree with everything everyone said. I liked everyone's contributions. And there are, I think last I checked, there were 14 different definitions of empathy. So it's just important to be clear what we're talking about. So in NVC, we talk about giving empathy, but technically you don't give empathy. Technically, you're giving your full presence. And as a result, the other person's need for empathy is met. So it's okay colloquially to say we give empathy, but so empathy is a universal human need. When I feel deeply understood or deeply gotten, my need for empathy is met. And I think Juliana, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, said a respectful understanding. So a respectful understanding or a compassionate understanding. And for me, compassion is a sense of deep care, but it can look a lot of different ways. So I'm walking with a friend on the sidewalk, and I suddenly see a deep hole, and my friend is about to step in this hole, and they could hurt themselves, and I shove them. I push them really hard so they don't hurt themselves in this hole. That could be an act of compassion, even though from the outside it might look like, I pushed them hard. So compassion can look a lot of different ways, and I'll just close there. I'll say one more thing. Chogyam Trungpa, a Buddhist teacher, he used to use a term idiot compassion. And he said, let's say you have a friend who's just a total complete alcoholic, and you feel for them, and so you give them a case of whiskey for their birthday. So that's what this Buddhist teacher called idiot compassion. But sorry, one more, Leanne. The difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy, like Cliff was saying, I'm not home. I'm fully with the other person. It's like when you're reading a book and suddenly you disappear and the room disappears and there's just this great story unfolding. That's what empathy is like. I'm fully with the other person. I'm not even necessarily home. Sympathy is if I'm resonating with what's happening for the other person. Like when people say, I feel your pain, that's sympathy versus empathy, the way Marshall talked about it. And sympathy is also a universal human need. It lets us know that we're not alone, but it's different than empathy. There's an instrument in India called a sitar that has a set of strings that you don't play. They're there to resonate with the other strings, and they're called sympathetic strings. So if I'm vibrating with, then I'm home. That could be sympathy rather than fully with the other person, empathy. I'll pause there.
And I find that going from sympathy to empathy to compassion, there's a level, like it's along a spectrum. We're going from distanced in sympathy to closer connection towards compassion. Sympathy, then empathy.
Well, I'm using sympathy in a different way than, for example, Brene Brown uses it. Brene Brown uses the word sympathy to mean like feeling pity or feeling sorry for someone. But in NVC, sympathy is a universal human need. So it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily that spectrum of closeness, farther or closer, because it can happen so fast. In reality, I can be moving from empathy to sympathy back and forth really fast, but feeling with, like if somebody said to me, "Oh, I know just how you feel because I felt the same way when my dad died." That could help me feel very close to them, even though it's sympathy. That could help us both feel very close because we've both been through the same experience. So I'm not sure if I'd have to think about the spectrum, but it can happen so fast that we move from being home to being with the other person to being back here. It could appear to happen simultaneously, but I think it's just very, very rapid movement.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contribution. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have a moment to talk about this, because our exercise today is going to have to do with being able to understand an other side of a situation or an issue that we may not understand presently. And so the exercise is, and I'm going to put the prompt in the chat. The exercise is for us to go into small groups in breakout rooms and think about a global social change issue together. And through the practice of working in that group, we'll get to a place of deciding on one issue to work on together. And then think about the stories around that issue on the different sides of the issue, different perspectives. Maybe just choosing two that are opposing issues or opposing perspectives over that issue. And then thinking about the needs on both sides of that issue, or both from both perspectives on that issue. What are the needs the one party is looking to meet? What are the needs the other party is looking to meet? And then can you relate to those needs being unmet? So together in the group, talk about ways that that issue comes up for you, or those needs have come up for you, and you've not been able to meet those needs, whether it's in that situation or something similar. And then finally, the last step would be for you together as a group to formulate some kind of statement about the issue without having any judgments, without having any enemy images, that would acknowledge the needs that are unmet, to try to bring the issue to a full, like having a full perspective on it. So I'm going to give you an example before we dive in, and we're going to go into the groups and take just a few minutes where you can get to know each other for just a moment, and then figure out, everybody bring one issue to talk about, figure out one issue out of all of the ones that are brought to work on together. So whether you do that democratically or draw straws, random number selection, just pick one issue that everyone can relate to, that the group will work on together. How does that sound for the people that are here? Does that sound like something that you'd be interested in doing? Does anybody have any hard no's against this practice? Okay, and if you're not going into the breakout rooms, please add an equal sign in front of your name. If you want, you can go into the breakout rooms and just listen. You don't have to participate in the discussion, which is what I would suggest you do. I would love for you to participate fully. I would love for you to bring your voice. I would love for you to contribute. But if you, for some reason, are unable to talk right now, then I would just go into the room and listen. We'll have about 4 to 5 people in each group, so there should be enough spaciousness for one or two people to go in there and not have the ability to speak, but just listen in. Okay, so the exercise example that I have for you is where, say, for example, I want to talk about single stream trash versus recycling. Pick an issue that's not too intense, right? Don't talk about the nuclear arms race. Don't talk about things that are really, we want to work our way towards the more intense issues. We want to take something easy where we may be able to see the other person's perspective, because this is just a practice to get used to this exercise. And so instead of doing single stream waste versus recycling, I go into my group and we decide that we're going to work on compost instead. Composting versus single stream waste. So that's the topic at hand. Now, for the second step, what's the story? I can think about the other perspective of why people wouldn't want to compost. Right? They wouldn't want to compost because it's stinky, because it makes a gross container that you have that attracts pests. They don't have a garden, so why would they want to collect food waste? So these are all the sides of the argument that are where people who wouldn't want to have compost as part of their waste regimen, this is the way that they're thinking. So just thinking about the stories that they have, the perspective that they have, and then think about the needs that they have associated with that. They have the need for ease, they have the need for choice, they have the need for healthy environment. And again, this is kind of like perspective, right? Because a healthy environment may mean instead that you're composting so we can add nutrients to the soil so that we can contribute to the quality of the food. But just looking at it from their perspective. And then my needs in the situation would be that I would want interdependency. I would want contribution to that earth system. I want to be able to serve life. And then when we get to the next step, can you relate to having those needs met? Yeah, sure, I can. I can relate to not wanting to compost. I can relate to not having need for ease and choice being met. For example, one story that comes to mind is if I were a single mother with 3 kids working a full-time job, there would be no way for me to be able to compost, right? It's such a huge burden of time and energy and just an extra thing I'd have to do. I could totally relate to someone not being able to compost their food. And then last but not least, come up with a few sentences that can help to describe what could be happening in the situation to bring a broader perspective on the different perspectives on the issue at hand. And I'm trying to make the breakout rooms. Does anybody want to try to formulate that sentence right now while I put the breakout rooms together? Couple sentences. What's the story? What's the story behind the issue that can talk both sides of the story, that can include both perspectives into the explanation of what's going on? This is a very challenging question, I know, and I'm just going to give you the answer because once you get in there and you practice, you'll see that you can do this. So the final example I came up with is that some people are not interested in composting the food waste. We recognize that it's not easy, and people may find it challenging to store food waste separately because it can attract pests. It's important for me to care about the earth and the interdependency of earth systems. When I contribute to supporting improving soil quality, it helps me meet my need for serving life and my environment. So do you see how that works? Does anyone have any questions before we go into the breakout rooms? Once you get in there and you figure out like what you're going to work on, I think together you should have no problem going through this process. Anybody?
There's a question in the chat from Melissa about how to put the equal sign in front of your name, and I think it's different on if you're on a computer or your phone.
It's okay. Melissa, I'll make sure to put you. Are you going to be, Melissa, will you be listening or will you be just not wanting to go into a breakout room at all? No breakout room for you. Is that right with the equal sign?
I can listen.
Great.
I can listen. I may not be able to participate.
Got it. Thank you very much for that clarity. All right. So I have one room with all the people with the equal sign.
Leanne, a few people with the equal sign are saying they want to go in a breakout room, but they just want to listen.
Thank you so much. What I will do is I'll take a look at the chat and I'll reallocate once. Let me see if I can see that. It's hard to see the participants and the chat at the same time. Let's see, press 3 dots, listening, thanks. Oh, Melissa's going to listen. Wonderful, I see that. Mira, I'm just calling people's names out. Rafa, we talked about this already. Let's see. Got it. Okay, wonderful. All right, so you see the time breakdown. Does anybody have any questions? And what I'm planning to do is float around and see if you guys are doing okay in your rooms. And I wonder if anybody has any hard nose against that. I know the need for privacy and the need for kind of like having a feeling of it being a closed circle may be important to you. So I don't want to impede on your flow once you're in the session. 2, 1. All right. Okay, cool. I think I have it ready to go. Okay. All right, so I'm going to set the timer. We're going to be in the room for just like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes to decide on what the topic will be that you're discussing. If you need any help, you can ask for help. There's a little button at the bottom. It says ask for help. And I will come in and give you a hand. And I wonder, Jane and Dolly, I wonder if you still wanted to participate in the exercise. I know that was quick, and we're going to go back in for 25 more minutes, but I wonder, were you able to come up with an idea around what you could work on together? Yeah, that's cool. Way to go. That's so short. How was it? Did everybody feel resourced with their group? Did you feel like you had enough people, enough voices? Was it feeling like you were supported in the work, in the project? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to send you back in. Feel free to ask for help. If you need me, I see your name, Muzaffar. Is that right?
Yeah. In our group, everybody was on listening mode and we could not decide on topic. And another thing is we could imagine big topics only. We could not identify small topic to work on. So like that decision has not been made, and because many people were in listening. So I wonder like what from here uh, what we are going to do and where we are going to go with. Or like just we are going in this room for 20 to 25 minutes and everybody will be silent. So I have that wondering.
Okay, cool. Well, you know what I can do is
Hmm.
I can put you with another group that is already actively working. And then
Okay.
if other people speak up, then I'd be happy to move them as well. Does anybody
Yeah.
else want to be moved to a different group because their group was not able to find something, or they just weren't they were in listening mode?
Yeah,
Yeah,
hello.
yeah, I'd like to say,
Actually, the person who was with him in a room, and I would also prefer not to speak too much because there is a small child who is trying to fall asleep next to me. So at least for some time, it would be better for me to listen.
Okay, great. Is it Lilia? Okay, let me I'm gonna place you with groups that have already decided on their topic. Cliff, I see your hand. What's up? Tell me.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe if those who don't want to participate, maybe could just stay here in the forum with you and just discuss, and you can just discuss it openly, maybe with more free space. Because it feels always awkward being in a room where maybe three are participating, but one is just sitting silently in the back. And yeah, I'm just thinking maybe that's a better way of getting everyone's needs met.
So I hear you have a need for participation in the group that you're in. Is that right? You have
Yeah, I would love that. I would love it. I would enjoy.
privacy that you're concerned with, or is it like a safety thing? I'm wondering what's the need?
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm a drama teacher, so I really like everybody to participate because sometimes you don't have so much, but at least you're there. You try to say something, and it feels more like shared reality and integration, inclusion. Yeah, not a lot of beautiful needs met. And being up, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, something. Yeah, for me, well, sometimes I've been in a workshop where there's people been quiet, and it's somehow how to say it stops the movement. So people get more freely and more generous when people are generous.
Okay, so maybe
I'm just want to share that.
okay. I wonder, are there any groups that would be okay with other people listening to them as they're working through this project to support learning and inclusion of the people that aren't able to actively participate? Sammy, I see your hand, and I wonder if the rest of the people in your group are okay with that as well. I see some people are already listening there. Okay. Annalise.
Yeah, just hi. It's great to be together with everybody. I would just ask my group members. I just put my hand up in terms of I'd be willing in our group, if the other group members agreed, to have people in to just listen. If the other folks want to say, put up your hand and say yes or no. And
So
okay.
it's yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was room 4.
I see that, and I really appreciate that. And I see it was just the two of you, and I'm wondering.
No, we have 2 more. Like we had 3.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
I'm also fine. I'm also fine.
Oh, okay. All right, awesome. And Mira, let's see, room 4. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So it seems that that's the case. I wonder if room 2, Cliff, the room you're in, when you go in, if you have people listening and they're not participating because they haven't indicated that they're not participating in the way that they've named themselves. If they're not participating, then you can ask for help and I can come in and we can rearrange. Does that meet everybody's needs for inclusion on both sides of the perspective?
Or raise your hand if it does not meet your needs for inclusion.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you. Okay. I just opened the rooms again. Go back in there. I'm going to send you a warning in about 10 minutes, but keep an eye on the time.
Leanne, did you send everybody in a breakout room?
Yes, would you like to go, Lena?
I was in a room with Cliff, but something happened. I was kicked out instead of joining the room. Just to rejoin the meeting. It's some kind of a weird bug, I guess.
Okay, cool. Let me, sorry about that. Let me see if I can find you, Lena. Nice to see you, Lena. Okay, there we go. Room number 2.
I'm sorry, I forgot the number. I would have told you.
And Andre, would you like to go into a room again? Are you still interested in listening? Welcome back, everyone. How was it? Would anyone like to share about their experience? Maybe the summary of where you landed and how it went? Annalise, I saw your hand. Would you like to share?
I'm sharing because of group consciousness. They decided that I would share, but I suggested other people share as well as it comes up. So one of the things I can say was that we started off with a bigger topic of environmental concerns and chemicals. But it actually started small with household chemicals. Yes or no? How can we do this? And all the other things that go with that. I think then I know I was one of the people that started to expand it to the companies and countries, and I took it off. So from what originally started off as a very clear, small, manageable topic within 5 minutes, I was able to distract the group. I didn't mean to do it on purpose. I just noticed what I did. I took it off to more. And then we also talked about solutions, which again took it off of exactly what it was. And I know for myself in conversation, I do that a lot, and I can't stick and focus to the topic at hand within a time frame that's challenging. If I had a day or two, I'd be good. That's mine. I don't know. We certainly had the need for, the needs that we had, sometimes they were mutual. That once we explored what the other side was, and we got more clear about what we were going to talk about, and bring people back from others exploring larger topics to bring it down to narrow, and then which possibilities there might be, then we had differences and also similarities and needs. I think that's it that I can give for now, if anyone else wants to add.
Thank you for sharing. I see Kathy's hand.
Yes, I did some kind of summary for the group, but actually I want to share something quite personal, which and I want to thank my group and to celebrate them, because we went through a topic like online begging, which was proposed by someone in the group, and we were all attached, all three of us, and could relate to that. And then we were talking about all aspects, and then time was running, and I had this feeling of I need some kind of I needed to be finished or to be round, and I would like to do the last step. And then I interrupted the group. They were still in this discussion, but I was really doubting if I could, and I did. And for me, it was really nice to see the last minute we could mourn and we could empathize. And to me, I now have a really complete feeling, and I have clarity, and I feel connected. And yeah, this is what I would like to share, that we really managed to finish it in a way, even though we don't have the solution. But I felt like mourning and empathizing made it complete to me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. Mira, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. I'm in one group with Annalise, and we have asked her to summarize. I would like just shortly to add to her words that actually We have reduced the topic from a very global discussion about pollution to actually chemicals in households and pollution of water. And I'm grateful and inspired and feeling quite connected with the members of the group, and people have jumped in and discussed further. And actually, main needs came either on both sides, whether using chemicals or like chemicals, products based on chemicals or products based on more bio ingredients. And these were like safety, protection, caring for the people, and also affordability in a way, because nevertheless we would like to go for a better environment friendly products. This might be a challenge because they might be much more expensive, and at the same time might not have exactly the effect we're looking for. That's why efficiency was also one of the needs which can pop up. But yeah, the conclusion was that if we're able to raise awareness and to get together in a community, more change might happen in a positive way. Yeah.
Thank you, Mira.
Thank you.
And Amy, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. We had 2 people in our group and 1 listener. And the issue was illegal drugs. And then we narrowed it down to just marijuana legalization. And then the second thing that we were concerned about was for some, it could offer pain relief with few side effects. The mom could be, a single mom could be relaxed while parenting. So if it was legalized, and then if it was not legalized, there could be a risk of mental health. It could trigger health problems. What if the single mom had to drive? And then the third issue, the broader perspective, small farmers could profit, but if corporate interests became involved, there would have to be infrastructure on a community level, and that might support inequality. But private companies could provide legal test kits, and it could end a criminalization problem. So needs met would be safety and relaxation. That was our interpretation of the assignment.
Great. It was a lot, right? It was a lot of different parts and a lot of things to consider. Thank you
Yeah,
for-
there was, but with 2 people, it was really easy.
Nice. I'll keep that in mind. Maybe smaller groups next time. So just some summaries of what I just took away from all your shares is that this, it can be really complex issues that we're dealing with. And sometimes we can upsize and sometimes we can downsize with respect to how relevant it is to us individually versus the global scale. But keeping an eye on the issue itself and really a focus on what you want to talk about and what you're concerned with is important, so we don't get distracted by all the different variables that could be playing on or involved in the situation. So really just keeping a focus and preparing, right? Needing the time and the energy and the capacity to prepare well for these conversations is important. It was only 30 minutes that we spent together. And so if we're going to these group discussions, we have to do all this work beforehand, or we could do all this work beforehand and really help to prepare us to be able to deal with talking to other people about it. And I also heard from the group from Kati that something important about the exercise was not only the care for this exercise, but also the care for the group and supporting each other through the process. So that's really beautiful to hear. And that the connections, where that connection was met for some of you while you went through this process. And that through these conversations, getting a better understanding of the needs that we have and the needs that they have, we may be able to bring more awareness to the issues that are important to us and connect with community and be able to exchange ideas, which can then result in change. So I really appreciate your time and energy with this exercise. I think for the next session, we're going to take this exercise and we're going to expand it. So it'll be like almost the full 2 hours. We're going to go through this much more slowly. And we've got a couple of other components that I've put together that will help us feel more empowered to address some issues that come up in the conversation, to be able to take those, our concerns to other people that may have opposing views and possibly have a conversation about it. So I look forward to that at the next session, which will be in 2 weeks. And now I want to take a moment to just pause and see if there's anything else about this exercise before we transition into some more social change and NVC stuff that's a little less related to this or not directly related to this exercise. Or maybe directly related to this exercise. Depends on the conversation, right? Okay. So now, Rafa, what are you thinking?
I just want to acknowledge that there's something I'm tuning into, and I just want to name it in case anybody else is tuning into it, which is just a sense of heartbreak around the state of the world and the state of relationships and things that are happening, species extinction, climate change, acute poverty. I just want to name it. And there's a lot of mourning that comes with trying to create social change. Because it's so big. And for me, NVC is necessary, but not sufficient. It's really important. And there's so much more. One of the frames that's helpful for me comes from Stephen Covey when he talks about differentiating between your sphere of concern and your sphere of influence. Because those of us who want to create positive change, a lot of my energy can leak out by just putting all my attention in my sphere of concern that's outside of my sphere of influence. And so my heart breaks around children starving in Uganda. My heart breaks around the Great Barrier Reef. Just there's so many things. And so really discerning what's in my circle of concern outside of my circle of influence and what's actually in my circle of influence. And the idea is that if I focus my energy in my circle of influence, it contributes to my circle of influence growing. And I can't emphasize enough how much high-level nonviolent communication skills can help you when you find yourself in a social change situation, whether by inserting yourself intentionally or because it just kind of happened and you found yourself in a situation. So I want to share, I have a lot of things I can talk about and share, but I want to share a scenario I found myself in and just kind of hear from folks here, like, what would you have done? And then I'll share and I'll tell you what I did. And like that, I have a few scenarios and I have other things that we can talk about. So I was invited just because of this is many years ago, but I was invited because of my interests and my background, I was invited to chair a committee in a local organization. The local organization was, I live in a rural area, and it was our local Economic Development Association. And for most people, economic development looks like creating strip malls and just paving everything with concrete. It's not, most economic development has made the world ugly. But I had a background in sustainability, and the head of this group, the chair, invited me to lead a sustainability committee within this organization. And this organization brought in people from local government and from local business who often showed up at these meetings because there was nowhere else that they exchanged information. So imagine a meeting where we have people from the county council, we have our director of Parks and Recreation, the director of county planning and development. We have several presidents of chambers of commerce from some of the small cities around us, just this whole room of kind of local movers and shakers. And I'm there, it's my second or third meeting, and I don't have any position of power there. And one of the people, a president of one of the chambers of commerce, stands up and he points his finger around the room and he says, "You people, you're just another group of rich people who only care about other rich people, and you're not helping any of the people up there in the valley who are struggling financially and economically. This is just another group of rich people helping other rich people." And then he sits down. And the facilitator looks at him, looks at her notes at the agenda, looks at him again, looks at her notes, and she says, "Okay, next thing on the agenda is," like that. And I was stunned by what had just happened. And I'm curious, what would you do? Does anyone, I did something in that moment. I did something. But I want to hear if anyone, what might you have done bringing your NVC skills to that situation? Just open your mic. You don't need to raise your hand. You can just turn your mic on or unmute.
Well, I've been known to speak up at meetings, so I have to ask myself before I speak up, what is my role? Also, I'm retired and unemployed. It was a lot different 20 years ago when I was raising my daughter, trying to keep a house and keep my job,
I got it.
because I was
so
involved in municipalities.
let's refocus it on what would you have done in this situation?
I would have spoken up and said, let's get back on track. And the purpose of the meeting was.
Oh, got it. Gotcha. So this person stands up, points his finger at everybody, says, "You people, you're just a bunch of rich people who only care about other rich people. You don't care about the people struggling over there." And you might have said something like, "Let's keep it on track." Okay.
I think so.
What else? Jeannie, someone in the chat says, "I would say he needs to be validated." And how might you have done that if you're willing to speak it? Otherwise, you can put it in the chat.
Hi. Yeah, I would, I don't know the exact nuances of the meeting, but I know my town, how that meeting goes, and ask him if he needed some space or could create some space for him to actually write it down or let us know a little bit more about what that means, because there's something behind that. There's a need, and I hear anger, and I've been there myself. But it takes, to get to that empathy, I know it takes time. Not everybody's in that capacity at that meeting. So
Right. Thank you so much. Before I tell you what I did, I'm curious if there are other ideas or other, like, what you would have done. Go for it, Muzaffar.
Yeah, I would offer at least some empathy briefly that you seems to be in pain, lot of pain, and I want to understand this more. Maybe not now immediately, but maybe after this meeting. So I'm curious. I want to understand. Means
Yeah,
I see you are in pain. I want to understand your pain,
I
and
like it.
maybe
So you would name it and you would say something like, I see that you're in pain. I want to understand your pain. Maybe not in this meeting, but I would love to talk to you, connect outside the meeting.
yeah,
Something like that. Okay, I
yeah.
like that. Thank you. Okay, let me tell you what I did, and then we can move on to another scenario or other frameworks or ideas. So the facilitator had just looked at her agenda, looked at him a couple times, and then said, "Okay, next item on the agenda," and she was just going to move on. And I raised my hand, and she called on me, and I said, "Madam Chairperson, I just have a couple of questions for Jerry." And I said, "Jerry, it sounds like you're feeling a lot of maybe disappointment and frustration because you would like to see more evidence in this meeting that other people in this meeting care for people in our community who are struggling financially. Is that right? My understanding?" And he goes, "Yeah." Just the sigh of being heard. And then I followed up with, "Is there anything you would like from other people here in the meeting in relation to that, or was it enough to be heard?" And he goes, "Oh, no, it was enough to be heard." And then I turned to the chairperson. I was like, "Thank you. I feel complete with that." It took about 2 minutes. Afterwards, after the meeting, he comes up to me in the hallway and he goes, "Thanks for saving my ass in there." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was literally I was very curious. I was like, what do you mean?" And so it turns out that um, this was a pattern for him where he speaks his values in a way that alienates other people and pushes them away, and then it ruins the relationship. So by giving him empathy, it helped him hear a reframe of what he was trying to say, but also it helped other people in the room hear what his deeper values were behind his statement. And so I think he felt some hopefulness that it helped to preserve some of the relationships. So that's one scenario. That's one way I just jumped in. It wasn't pre-planned, right? It just happened. But you bring your skills to situations that show up. I'll share another scenario that happened. This is a different committee. Also, I was involved locally. This is before, anyway, this is just a while back. This was a committee also appointed by the local government. In Washington State, there's a state law called the Growth Management Act that's supposed to kind of control urban sprawl. And each county has flexibility as to how they implement a comprehensive plan. So under this Growth Management Act, every county has to have a comprehensive plan, and it's updated every 7 years. It has a 20-year planning horizon. So you're planning 20 years out, but it's updated every 7. And we had a committee of people from different subcultures, people who worked in logging, in the forestry world, people who were like business people who were more kind of bohemian, we could say, hippies, loggers, and business people. And that's my shorthand. We had these different worldviews in the room, and everybody's busy. We're all volunteers. Our task was to update the previous plan, and then kind of create this plan that included all land use policy, meaning, is it going to be a park? Is it going to be a factory? Is it going to be apartments? All land use policy, all infrastructure, including roads, but also including like gas pipelines and things like that, all infrastructure. And it included economics and jobs. So a really comprehensive long-term plan, we were given 6 meetings, 6 2-hour meetings, and everybody's busy, everybody's a volunteer. Our first meeting was entirely devoted to the rules of how we were going to meet. So we were supposed to come up with decisions by consensus, but we had a backup. If we couldn't come to consensus, we could vote. The chair of the committee is not a group facilitator. He's a cabinet maker. Doesn't know how to run a group, really. Not a good guy, but didn't know how to run a group. Didn't have the skills. And so I'm driving on my way to our second meeting, and I'm thinking to myself, this is a waste of time. I don't want to be part of a sham and just kind of like rush through this thing and put out a 20-year plan. And I want to have an influence in my local area. And this second meeting was a place where I jumped in and made a request. We had a one person who was our liaison to the local county government. And so I get to the meeting. I formulated my request while I was driving there. We get to the meeting, and there's no room for me on the agenda. The agenda's full, and there's a highly paid consultant there who's going to write up the final thing, and they have a full agenda. And within the first 2 minutes, I raise my hand, and I hold it raised until I get called on. They call on me, and I want to tell you what I said, because there's another scenario we could look at, and there are other things we could look at, but I want to tell you how I formulated my request, because this is such an important piece if you want to change the culture in your home, in your family, in your organization. If you want to interact with people who have their hands on their levers of power, clear requests are so important. And I want to give you 4 criteria for an NVC request. Before I go back to the scenario, I want to give you 4 criteria for an NVC request. It needs to be very specific and concrete. If you put out a vague request, you'll get a vague response. Specific and concrete. It needs to be doable. If, one of the worst things they could do is the other person says yes to your request that's not doable. Like, would you be willing to do the dishes forever and ever? Yeah, yes. Or promise me you won't die. I promise. It has to be doable. It needs to have positive action language. In other words, what you want the person to do versus not do. I notice some people are writing notes, so I'll recap. Specific, doable, positive action language. For example, I see my son. He's on his phone. I say, son, get off your phone. He says, no problem, Dad. I'm going to go outside and join a street gang. Oh, no, wait. I have this cool app. Come back. So what you want the person to do rather than not do. So, hey, son, when you're done playing that game, I'd like you to come back and complete your homework. Can you agree to that right now? Which brings us to the fourth criterion, which is present. Present request. How do I give the other person or the people the opportunity to respond in this moment? Specific, doable, positive action language, and present. How can they respond in this moment? So even if let's say the request is for tomorrow, like, hey, would you be willing to pick up my package tomorrow at 3? The way that I make a future request present is, can you agree right now? Would you be willing to agree right now to this future action? That's how I make a future request, a present request. And then in a group, it's a little different animal, even. Just takes it to another level. So I teach a 3-hour workshop just on requests, but I'm just giving you a little bit of just some pointers. Often what you see in groups is you'll see that a teacher or a professor say, did everyone understand the assignment? and then 3 people nod their head, and the professor or the teacher assumes that everyone understood it. But what they're actually wanting to know might be like the photo negative. So is there anyone who didn't understand the assignment? Is there anyone who's confused about what the assignment is? And then there's a way to get a snapshot from a group of people really quickly. So if you didn't understand the assignment, please raise your hand. And then you know who to talk to afterwards. So anyway, going back to the scenario, I'm at this meeting. I want to make a difference in my community. They've given us a recipe for failure. They've given us very few meetings for an enormous task. So I raise my hand, I interrupt, and I remember a saying that Marshall Rosenberg had. And he said, be willing to have the people around you look at you, be willing to have the people in the room look at you as if you were the one who put the turd in the punch bowl. So in other words, he was encouraging us to have courage. Like our needs for acceptance and belonging might be on the line, but we need to stand up for our own truth. So I raise my hand, I get called on, and I said, when I notice the scope of work that we have, and I notice the time frame we have, I feel really concerned because I have needs for effectiveness and I really want to produce a quality product. So I'd like to propose that our liaison with the county government goes to the county council and requests a year-long extension on our work as a committee. I'd like to see a show of hands from anyone in the committee who has an objection or a concern to the proposal I just made. So that was the concrete, doable, present request was I'd like to see a show of hands of anyone who has a concern or objection around my proposal. 4 people raised their hands. After some discussion, 2 people lowered their hands. We couldn't get to consensus. We went to a vote. People voted in favor of my proposal. Our liaison went to the county government and got a year-long extension on our work. And we were able to work on this 20-year plan for a whole year instead of just 6 meetings. And we were able to have people come and speak to the committee, like the director of emergency management and all these different experts in their area. But that's just an example of being courageous and making a request, thinking about how could this work. And so there's another key differentiation here. A proposal is not a request. For any given proposal, there could be 50 requests. I'll give you a couple examples. Here's my proposal. I'd like to see a show of hands of who liked my proposal. Here's my proposal. I'd like to see a show of hands of people who can think of obstacles that would get in the way of my proposal getting adopted. Here's my proposal. I'd like to see a show of hands of people who are willing to meet with me after the meeting to draft the letter to the person that we need to contact. So if somebody brings a proposal, my first question is, what's your request in relation to the proposal? One more, because I saw this earlier, right at the beginning, when Leanne asked if there were requests, and somebody said that there's open-mindedness, non-judgmental, open-mindedness, and curiosity. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going back in the chat to look at it, but open-mindedness and curiosity. That's a desire. And so that's another key differentiation, a desire versus a request. Because I grew up in a family where somebody would say, oh, I'd really love a glass of water. Okay, that's not a concrete, doable request. That's a desire. Would you be willing to bring me a glass of water? That's a concrete, doable request. But putting out a desire like, oh, I'd really like a back rub right now. People can just pretend they didn't hear it, and it's just not, it's not a concrete, doable request. I attended a workshop where the person cited a study where anthropologists had divided cultures into guess cultures and ask cultures. And in a guess culture, the benefit of just putting out like, oh, I'd love a glass of water. The benefit of that is you save face. No one, it's uncomfortable receiving a no, but the other people also, they don't have to directly say no if it doesn't work for them. So there's advantages to that, but there's a lot of disadvantages too. And in ask cultures, you're actually expected to have a little bit more direct communication. So NVC requires us to know not just our feelings and needs, but also what do I want? And then how do I request it in a way that's doable? Okay, last one, and this time I'll ask people what you would do in this last scenario. Same committee, 20-year plan. We're sending a questionnaire to the community. It takes a whole meeting to just go through one page of this 2-page questionnaire. So at the end of the meeting, people are almost ready to leave. And I say, I would like us to be more efficient as we go through this thing. And I made a suggestion of something that people could look at. The chair of the committee didn't like my specific strategy. He turns to his right and makes a joke. Half the room erupts in laughter, including the whole section with the public. I never heard what his joke, and I to this day, I don't even know what he said. So again, end of the meeting, I want to contribute. I make a suggestion. The person running the meeting turns to their right, makes a joke. Half the room erupts in laughter. What do? I'll tell you what I did after, but I did something. I'd love to hear ideas. What ideas do you have? Leanne, you get to participate too. What would you have done in that situation? I'll tell you 2 things I didn't do. Oh, go ahead, Leanne.
No, I was gonna see if anybody else wanted to speak first.
One option I had was to shrink in my seat and be like, never mind. Just be like, I don't matter. It wasn't important. And just be embarrassed and shrink. That was one option. Another option would have been to conclude that this person's a jerk and they're not my friend and my needs don't matter to them and kind of be angry about it. Resent them into the future. That was another option. Still, any ideas? Anyone want to share what you might have done? I'll tell you what I did. I stood up a little bit in my seat and I raised the volume of my voice and I said, "Excuse me, I'd like to be heard differently. I'd like to try again." The specific example wasn't important. What I'd like people to hear is that I really value efficiency, and I would love it if committee members would go back and think about how we might make the next meeting more efficient. And I checked whether people were hearing me, and I concluded they were, and I said, thank you. That's what I did. I wouldn't have done that had I not studied NVC.
I also hear you empathizing with yourself in that situation.
It might have been super fast. It might have been like just lightning self-empathy. I was definitely self-connected. And one thing, people who are new to NVC sometimes think NVC is about being nice, but it's not about being nice. It's about being real in a way that's also compassionate. So I'm not going to roll over and be a doormat or just let the situation run over me. I stayed self-connected, and I stood up a little bit in my seat. I said, "Excuse me, I'd like to be heard differently. I'd like to try again." And then I restated it. Thank you for this comment in the chat. I'm glad you were able to do that. Not all races and genders are able to do that. Yes, and that has to do with power dynamics. It has to do with sometimes privilege. it has to do with trauma, sometimes situational trauma, sometimes generational trauma. So yeah, sometimes, you know, to get to use NVC in social change situations, sometimes we need to do a lot of healing. And sometimes people do speak up in that way, regardless of race and gender. And for example, it's so hard for women in the United States in 2025 to be assertive and not receive judgments about like, oh, you're being a bitch, or you're being, you know, it's okay for men to be assertive, but when a woman is assertive, they get judged. Like I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge what you're saying, Jeannie, in the chat. I'm glad I was able to do that too. And I've done a lot of work to try to acknowledge my privilege. And I want to define what I mean by the term privilege, because it can be charged for people. What I mean by privilege is unearned social advantages. Oh, thank you. I'm not trying to speak. Thank you. I would like to make a request that you don't speak for women in the US. Okay. I'm speaking based on conversations I've had with my mother, with my sister, and with female friends. So I'll just keep it at that. But it does happen. And somebody wrote in the chat, sometimes death threats. So yeah, I try to use the unearned social advantages that I have to create more equitability, more peace, more harmony. And a lot of us have a steeper climb because of unearned or undeserved social disadvantages. And I think that that's what your first comment in the chat was referring to when you said, I'm glad you were able to do that. Not all races and genders are able to do that. Now, the word able, I almost want to bring up the quadrants of leadership and power. When I first met Leanne,
I
we
would
were
be
able
happy to
to.
speak. Oh, sorry. I would be happy to speak with that if you're questioning it, but I don't want to interrupt you either.
Well, when I first met Leanne, we disambiguated 4 different definitions of power, because in a workplace, some people have structural power, like one person has the power to fire somebody else. Some people have, and then there's physical power. I can use my strength to defend somebody who's being bullied, or I can use my height to reach something from a high shelf or something. There's interpersonal relational power, like the person who can call in a lot of favors, or the person who might be very soft-spoken, but when they do speak, people want to listen. That's like an interpersonal relational power. And then there's also like what people refer to as personal power or spiritual power. That's the power that allowed someone like Nelson Mandela to survive 27 years of prison, more or less intact and able to become president of his country. And so it takes a lot to overcome some of those race and gender barriers. And I think a lot of it has to do with that personal or spiritual power. So I'll just pause there. And Jeannie, I want to let you speak if there's something you would like to say.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for explaining that, Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned a lot here today, so I'm really happy, and I like the observations and requests. I was just saying on the power, I've learned a lot, and I'm not any specialist or have any power in this as a white woman, but I did take a cultural humility class, and I learned a real lot about humility. And my
Yay.
request was based on learning that I cannot understand what it is like to be a Black woman in the United States.
Not from your own experience.
I cannot understand that. I can
Understood.
listen. and I need to listen more. And I've learned, but I need to keep listening because the historical perspective of each woman can't be made into a sentence that's subjective. It's just really much deeper than that. And I would love to, somehow request that if NBC does anything with cultural humility, that would be amazing. Those two intersections. Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there are trainers who specialize in that, and the Center for Nonviolent Communication just has been implementing a DEI policy that's become a huge conversation within the Center for Nonviolent Communication and the trainers, in part because the policy that was implemented was coming from a American-centric lens, and people from other countries wanted their cultural experiences also integrated into what was happening. So Leanne just put some links in the chat. I'm going to throw some questions in the chat for people to consider related to social change. When you were in your small groups, for example, the one talking about household chemicals, it started out as big pollution, and then so some questions I would ask is like, what is the specific change you'd like to see? Who has the power to effectuate that change? And then how do you access and engage with the person or people who have that power? So if you want to change household chemicals through legislation, like outlaw them, the people who have the power to do that is one set of people. If you want to change household chemicals through people not buying them, then it's the people in those households who have the power to create that change. And so it's just very different pathways depending on who you're trying to influence. So I'll leave it at that. And then the very last thing that I'll add to the links that Leanne put in the chat is I run a practice group during this time every Friday. And the reason that I'm here is Leanne and I decided to invite the people from my practice group to these sessions so that we wouldn't need to change the time for this group. And but there's the link, and then there's some other links, and I'll hand it back to Leanne.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation, for showing up, for being here with us as we learn from each other. Really appreciate everyone's presence and contribution. And grateful for Rafa and his time and his shifting his schedule around to be here with us, to participate, to bring his energy and expertise. So I wonder if we could take a moment and unmute and just thank Rafa for being here. Thank each other for your presence.
Thank you, Leanne, for hosting and facilitating, and thanks for the invitation.
And I'll send an email following up with the link to the recording and then an invitation to the next session. So look out for that. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
That was really great. I'm off to John Kenyon now. He's going to have another session, and that's available. I put wasn't fast enough to put all the information in the chat, but if you go over there, you can still join us. And
You can
in
tell
5
John I
hours,
say hi.
free meeting
I've known John
with the
for 25
Hawaiian
years.
group. So I will
Oh,
say
sorry,
hello.
sorry, Annalise. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just so excited. I wanted to tell people because it's on now and I got to go. But I want to thank you. And I want to make sure that I'd come back because this was great. And
You
I
can
will
tell
be
John I
happy
say
to
hi.
up in meetings, meet that person's need. Okay, I'm on it. Thanks.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll stay
Leanne.
here for a few minutes if anybody needs anything else. I'm going to turn the recording off.
Take care, Leanne. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, Rafa. Thanks for your time. I'll follow up with you via email if you want to chat. Feel free to give me a call.
Beautiful. Annalise, tell John Kenyon I say hi if you get a chance.
Absolutely.
You can put it in
Come
the
and join
chat.
us. Come on over.
I have some
The other
other
side.
commitments. Thank you. Take
Okay.
care.
Bye.
Leanne, thank you very much for hosting this meeting.
Pleasure. Did you enjoy it, Mira?
I enjoyed it, even though I connected a bit. I joined a bit late, and I have received from an associate a link to the meeting. And actually, how may I receive the record so I can have the introduction time? I think I have joined about 40 minutes later, just before the rooms. So I was like, oops.
Oh, good. If you want to add your email in the chat, either directly to me or to everyone,
Yeah.
I'll copy it and
I think
I'll add
we're
your-
just 3 people left, so I'll just here it is.
Okay, cool. I got it.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Yeah, it was really, really nice. I was so tired when I joined, and I feel refreshed, and yeah,
Awesome.
it's inspiring. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for saying that. It's a lot
Yeah.
of fun. We enjoy it, and I'm really
Okay. Okay. See you in 2 weeks' time, and see you, Andrea, as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hmm. All right. We did it.